Today, you will share a touching story that shows how powerful loyalty and love are. A dog's unwavering devotion as it waits for its beloved owner to return reminds us how precious true friendship and loyalty are. Loyalty under the street lamp. It was a rainy autumn day in the city, a day when the fine rain never seemed to stop. The streets were shining with reflections of neon lights, and hurried footsteps echoed between the buildings. People rushed by, protecting themselves with umbrellas against the wet cold, and they soon overlooked the little brown dog sitting motionless at the entrance of the hospital. He had been there for a few days, his eyes warily scanning the doors, his wet fur stuck to his frail body. No matter how many people passed by, he never moved from his spot. His owner, an old man named George, had been taken to the hospital one night after suddenly collapsing on the street. The dog had tried to make his way among the paramedics, but the cold glass doors closed in his face. Since that day, he began to appear in front of the hospital door every morning, waiting with his nose pressed against the glass. Every evening, he curled up beneath the streetlight and slept, silently keeping watch. The hospital staff had gotten used to his presence there. Sometimes, security guards would bring him food scraps, a few kind-hearted nurses would leave a bowl of water. The owner of a nearby small cafe would feel sorry for him and sometimes cover his shivering body with a blanket. But no matter how much kindness was shown to him, he never left his spot. He kept watching the doors, waiting for the return of the person he loved most in the world. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. The autumn rain in the city transformed into the harsh winter rains, and nights grew longer and colder. The little dog's condition began to deteriorate. The ribs became more pronounced beneath his fur, and the sparkle in his eyes started to fade. But still, he stayed there. The streetlight flickered at night, casting a pale light on his frail body, while there remained an unwavering determination in his eyes. One evening, an old woman coming out of the hospital stopped in front of the dog. Slowly kneeling down, she touched his wet fur with her trembling hands. "You're waiting, aren't you?" she murmured. The dog turned his head toward her for a moment, then focused back on the doors. The woman sighed deeply, left a small bowl of warm milk, and walked away. A few minutes later, a little boy named Danny, who was visiting his mother, came over to the dog. With his big, curious eyes, he looked at the animal and silently asked, "Is he missing someone?" His mother, fatigued from illness but with a gentle smile, replied, "Yes, dear. He's waiting for his best friend to come back." One night, a strong storm swept over the city. Winds knocked over signs, and the rain poured down incessantly as if from a bucket. People rushed towards shelters, tightly wrapping their scarves around their faces, but the little dog didn't budge. Crouched under the streetlight, his tired body was shivering. A security guard paused under the awning to watch him for a moment and murmured, "I wish we could bring you inside, buddy." The next morning, he barely had the strength to lift his head. His breaths were slow and shallow. He was running out of strength. Then, something changed at the hospital window. A familiar hand waved, weak but distinctly. George. The dog's dull eyes sparkled. His tail wagged feebly. He let out a small, muffled bark, and his body trembled with renewed hope. George was alive. The hospital staff saw the dog's reaction and immediately rushed to the window. A nurse named Clara noticed the bond between the man and the dog. "He's waiting," she said, her voice choking with emotion. "He never gave up on him." The hospital administration, moved by the dog's loyalty, called in a veterinarian. The veterinarian gently brought the dog inside with a blanket and warm food, guiding him to rest. But even in that first moment lying down, his eyes were always fixed on the door. He wouldn't leave until George came out. A few days later, when George was finally discharged, the hospital witnessed a pure moment of joy. George, still weak, and holding tightly onto a nurse's arm, stepped outside with a tired face yet filled with emotions, and saw his loyal friend waiting for him. The dog, after a faint growl, ran towards George's arms, falling to the ground and collapsing into the man's embrace. Tears streamed down the old man's cheeks as he caressed the dog's face with his hands, whispering, "You've waited all this time, haven't you, my boy?" the dog nuzzled into George's hands. Wagging its tail wildly, the nurses wiped their tears as they watched this touching reunion. Nan and the dog were together again. While George recovered at home, the dog began to regain strength as well. Their daily walks resumed, starting off slow but gradually becoming longer. George would tell stories to the dog while walking in the park, and the dog listened attentively, its eyes reflecting unwavering loyalty. When the cold of winter returned, they would curl up under warm blankets together, finding silent comfort in each other's presence. One day, George's grandson Ethan came to visit. Initially wary of the aging dog, Ethan soon became enamored with its steadfast loyalty. The dog also showed affection to Ethan, following him everywhere and began to protect Ethan with the same quiet loyalty it had shown George. The three of them spent time together on the porch, sharing laughter, stories, and quiet moments. As time passed, George and Ethan started training the dog to do small tasks, like bringing George's slippers or carrying small items around the house. This gave the dog a sense of purpose and brought joy to George as he was aging. While the dog curled up at George's feet and slept, the old man would sometimes reminisce about his youth, the journeys he took to distant lands, and the dog would sit faithfully by him, resting its head on George's leg as if listening to every word being spoken. But time, as always, caught up with them. George fell ill again. At first, he thought it was just fatigue, but the illness quickly progressed. The dog did not leave George's side for a moment. While Ethan sat at his grandfather's bedside, the dog lay at George's feet, sensing what was to come. George's illness was something no doctor could solve. Despite numerous treatments, his body was giving in, and his spirit was slowly fading away. One morning, George peacefully passed away in his sleep. The dog remained motionless. It rested its head on George's still hand, and there was an indescribable sorrow in its eyes. When Ethan learned of his grandfather's death, he knelt by the bed and held the dog tightly. The dog gently nuzzled Ethan's hand with its nose, feeling the pain in his heart. "He's gone, my boy," whispered Ethan, his voice trembling. As George was buried, Ethan noticed that the dog had not left the graveside for even a moment. It lay curled up next to the graves, silently keeping watch. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The townsfolk, admiring the dog's loyalty, brought it food and water, but the dog scarcely ate any of it. Ethan visited him every day, watching as the dog continued to honor its silent vow. The dog was not just waiting for George, it was also waiting the return of a bond that had transcended time, one that had been silently understood between them. One afternoon, Ethan sat down beside the dog and gently stroked its fur. "Come on, buddy. I know he loved you most of all, but he must be gone now. Let's go home," he said. The dog hesitated momentarily with uncertainty of its age and fatigue, but after a long wait, it stood up and followed Ethan, walking slowly yet determinedly. Years passed, and the dog spent its remaining days with Ethan, filled with love and warmth. Once full of boundless energy, it began walking more slowly, but the light in its eyes remained the same. Ethan took the dog to the beach, preparing its favorite meals. Ethan made sure to spend every moment with him. Ethan never forgot the loyalty the dog showed to his grandfather and told this story to anyone who wanted to listen. His friends, neighbors. Everyone heard the dog's story, and the little brown dog became a legend as an unwavering friend. One evening, the old dog curled up at Ethan's feet, gently closed its eyes, and took one last deep breath. Ethan, now an old man, gently kissed the dog's head and whispered, "Thank you, my old friend." Ethan buried the dog in the garden, under the tree where they had spent countless afternoons together. He placed a small plaque on it. "Loyalty never dies." Every morning, Ethan left a flower on its grave, because that dog was not just a pet, it was family. And its story, the story of the little brown dog waiting for its owner outside the hospital, had become a legend, a reminder of pure love and loyalty, of a dog's unwavering devotion.